After 20 years of waking up beside the same woman, silence has a way of pressing down on you, like a weight you carry in your chest, just beneath the ribs. It had only been 6 weeks since Laura passed, but already the house felt foreign. Every room still held her scent, her rhythm, her ghost. The kitchen echoed with her humming, the couch remembered her favorite corner. Our bedroom, well, that was the worst. The bed had become a canyon, too wide and too cold. I stayed on my side, still, as if leaving room for her would somehow keep her real. I'm Michael. I'm 42. A mechanical engineer by profession. A husband, or at least I used to be. Now I'm something else. A widower, I guess. A man learning to boil his own tea without sobbing. The days were manageable. I could keep busy. Clean things that didn't need cleaning. Pretend that sorting tools in the garage was important. But the nights stretched. That's when it crept in. The loneliness. The guilt of still breathing. The ache that lived in the silence. Daniel moved in around the 3rd week. He was my best friend since college. A calm presence with quiet eyes, and the kind of patience I lacked. After Laura's funeral, he offered to stay for a bit. Said it wasn't good for me to be alone. I told him I didn't want to be a burden. He smiled and said, "That's what friends are for. You've carried me before. It's my turn." So, he took the guest room, unpacked his few bags, and quietly started stitching my routine back together. He cooked most evenings. Nothing fancy. Soups, grilled sandwiches, Laura's favorite creamy mushroom pasta. He even hummed while stirring, sometimes the same tune Laura used to. The first time I heard it, I froze in the hallway. I don't think he realized. Or maybe he did, but he never said a word. He used phrases she used. "Careful, it's hot." Or, "Don't forget your keys." They slipped out naturally, like his mind had picked them up by accident. At first, I bristled. Then I found myself waiting for it. Her ghost, delivered softly through his voice. One night, I was sitting in the living room, pretending to watch a documentary I didn't care about. The house was quiet, except for the occasional creak of wood shifting with the evening air. That's when I smelled it. Cinnamon and black tea, steeping just the way Laura used to make it. Strong, a little sweet, with a twist of lemon rind. Daniel stepped into the room holding a mug. He didn't speak right away, just stood there watching me. The steam curled around his wrist as he extended the cup. "I thought you might want this," he said, "like she used to make it." My fingers trembled a little when I took it. I didn't look at him. I just nodded and said, "Thanks." He didn't leave. Not immediately. He stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame like he'd done it 100 times before, like it was normal. I looked up after a moment. "What?" I asked with a half-smile. He shook his head gently. "Nothing. Just checking on you." "I'm fine," I lied. "I know," he replied, "but sometimes fine looks a lot like drowning." I didn't answer that. I sipped the tea. It burned my tongue, just a little. She always used to do that, hand it to me too soon. She said I was too impatient. She was right. Daniel stayed. A moment longer, then finally said, "Sleep well, Mike," and disappeared down the hall. But I didn't sleep well. I lay there in bed with the mug on the nightstand and the tea cooling into memory. The empty space beside me felt even emptier, like Daniel had pulled something into the room with him. A thread of warmth, or memory, or maybe something else I didn't have a name for. For the first time in weeks, I missed Laura differently. Not as the woman I lost, but as the space she once filled. A shape now echoed by someone still here. Grief plays tricks on your senses. It rearranges your memories, sharpens certain sounds, dulls others. For me, it started with the humming. Daniel had a habit of humming when he cooked or cleaned. Sometimes I'd catch myself mid-motion, frozen in place, because the sound was just so close. Laura used to hum that same tune, a soft, lazy melody that never had a name. It was something she'd made up. She used to say it came to her while folding laundry or watching the rain. Now it was coming from the kitchen while Daniel stirred pasta. At first, I thought I imagined it. But then he did it again the next night, and the one after. The same soft rhythm, just under his breath. Then there were the touches, gentle ones, on the shoulder when passing behind me. A hand on my forearm when asking if I wanted more coffee. Light, lingering, never inappropriate, just familiar. Too familiar. One evening, I was sitting at the dining table sorting old mail. Daniel came up behind me and rested his hand on my shoulder as he asked, "You want me to pick up more lemons tomorrow?" I said, "Sure." But my mind was already elsewhere, because that was exactly how Laura used to do it. The hand placement, the tone, even the phrasing. The smallest things, slipping into place like puzzle pieces I hadn't noticed were missing. Was he doing it on purpose? Was it just coincidence? I didn't know. I tried not to overthink it. After all, Daniel had known Laura almost as long as I had. He'd spent years at our dinner table, on our porch, helping her carry groceries. Maybe he'd picked it all up by osmosis. Maybe it was just his way of comforting me. But it was starting to blur lines I didn't even realize were still drawn. That night, I found myself replaying memories. Laura in the kitchen, dancing barefoot while stirring soup. Laura pressing her cheek to my back in bed, whispering, "You're too warm. I'm stealing your side." Laura laughing. Not a loud laugh, but a soft one, the kind you feel more than hear. I missed her like breath in the lungs. And now, bits of her were showing up in someone else. Daniel. And that's where it got complicated. Because when he smiled at me now, there were moments, small, fleeting, where I forgot whose smile it was. Not because I didn't know, but because my heart wanted it to be hers. One night, I fell asleep on top of the covers, fully dressed. The TV had long since gone black, humming its low screensaver glow. The air in the room was cold. The house quiet. I didn't even remember closing my eyes. But I woke suddenly. Not with a jolt, but with the heavy, slow return to consciousness that grief makes a habit of. Something felt off. Not wrong, exactly. Just not usual. The room was dim, lit only by the moonlight threading through the blinds. And then I saw him. Daniel, sitting quietly at the edge of the bed. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was downward, focused on some invisible thought. His hands were folded in his lap. His posture still, but not stiff. Peaceful. Intentional. "Daniel?" I said softly, my voice hoarse from sleep. He turned slowly, almost like he was expecting me to wake. "Sorry," he whispered. "Didn't mean to scare you." "What are you doing?" I sat up a little, my heart thudding more from confusion than fear. "I couldn't sleep," he said, glancing down again. "You were tossing in your sleep. I heard you from the hallway." I blinked at him, trying to ground myself in reality. "So you just came in?" He nodded, a small shrug lifting his shoulders. "You used to say Laura would wake you when you had nightmares. Sit with you. Thought maybe it'd help." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. He wasn't wrong. Laura had done that more than once. But hearing it from him, seeing him mimic her quiet devotion, it hit differently. I let the silence sit for a while before I said, "You didn't have to." "I know," he replied, still not moving. "But I wanted to." The moonlight caught in his eyes for a second. And in that light I saw something that scared me more than anything else. Not guilt, not pity, but care. Real, unfiltered care. And I felt something in my chest pull tight. Daniel stood after a moment. "I'll go." Didn't mean to cross a line. But as he reached the door, I found myself saying, almost too quietly, "You didn't." He paused, nodded once, and left. I sat there for a long time, staring at the door after it closed. I wasn't sure who I was grieving anymore. My wife, or the version of her that seemed to be quietly reawakening in someone else. I don't remember falling asleep, only remember the dream. Laura's laughter echoing down the hallway, soft and distant like wind chimes. She was wearing that blue robe she loved, her hand reaching for mine. But every time I tried to touch her, she faded like smoke. I woke to the sound of footsteps again, soft, barefoot. I didn't open my eyes at first. I knew it wasn't Laura. Not really, but part of me wanted to pretend. Just for a second. Then the mattress dipped. I turned my head and opened my eyes slowly. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his back to me, head slightly bowed. "It's late," I murmured, my voice gravelly. He didn't look at me. "I know," he said softly. "I couldn't sleep again." I pushed myself up a little, my pillow folding awkwardly under me. "Everything okay?" He nodded, but it was the kind of nod that meant no. After a pause, he said, "I miss her too." His voice cracked at the end. Just barely. I didn't respond right away. It felt like anything I said would break the room in half. "I keep thinking about her," he continued. "The way she smiled when she stirred her tea. How she used to leave the kitchen light on, even after you turned it off. She always said the house looked too dark otherwise." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, she did." He finally turned to look at me. "I don't know how you're doing this," he said. "Walking around like your chest isn't caving in." I looked down at the blanket, picking at a loose thread. "Some days I don't think I am." Silence again. Then he said it. "Can I stay here? Just for tonight?" I looked up. He held my gaze, steady but unsure. Like a man standing at the edge of something, afraid to fall but too tired to step back. "Why?" I asked. My voice was quieter than I expected. Daniel hesitated. "Because the house feels too big tonight, and because you shouldn't have to sleep alone if you don't want to." I didn't answer. I just moved over, pulling the blanket back a little. He climbed in carefully, laying on top of the covers at first, as if to maintain a barrier. But I could feel the mattress shift with every breath he took. I could hear the tightness in his chest as he exhaled. Neither of us spoke. The moonlight cut faint shadows across the ceiling. My eyes traced them aimlessly, trying not to focus on the fact that another body was lying next to me again. Not hers, but warm, present, steady. Our hands brushed once. A twitch of movement. His fingers grazed mine, then pulled back. But few minutes later, they found mine again. Deliberately this time. Not gripping, not clinging, just there. And I didn't pull away. I couldn't. Something about the way his fingers curled ever so slightly. It didn't feel romantic, and yet it didn't feel innocent either. It just felt human. I shifted, slightly, adjusting the blanket, and felt the warmth of his arm close to mine. Too close. Not close enough. "You don't have to be alone tonight," Daniel whispered, his voice barely a breath. "I don't want you to be." I turned my head slowly to look at him. He was already watching me. There was something in his eyes, not pity, not sadness, but something quieter, something raw, something I wasn't ready to name. My chest ached, not in the way it did when I talked about Laura, but in a newer, sharper way. I was scared of what that meant. Still, I didn't move. I let his hand stay in mine. I let the warmth settle. I let the silence stretch and stretch until it felt like a blanket of its own. In that moment, I didn't know where the line was anymore. Between comfort and confusion. Between grief and longing. All I knew was this. For the first time in weeks, the bed didn't feel so unbearably empty. I don't remember the dream itself, just the feeling, heavy warmth, a soft presence against me, and the distant smell of lemon and cotton, like her robe after the wash. For a moment, I thought I had died and gone backwards, that the universe had taken pity and dropped me in some old memory. But I wasn't dreaming. I opened my eyes slowly, instinctively careful not to move. Daniel was lying beside me. Not just beside me. His head was on my chest, his breath warm and steady against my shirt. One hand was resting across my ribs, fingers splayed just enough to feel personal. Exactly like Laura used to lie when she was tired and needed to listen to my heartbeat to fall asleep. I didn't move. My heart pounded. Not from fear. Not quite from desire either. It was something in between. A surge of confusion and something dangerously close to comfort. I stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together what time it was, what I should do, what I even felt. My mind scrambled for reasons. Maybe he shifted in the night. Maybe he was cold. Maybe this was an accident. But it didn't feel accidental. The weight of him was deliberate, relaxed, familiar. And what unsettled me more than anything was that I didn't hate it. I'd told myself I was alone now. That love, touch, warmth, those belonged to the past. But here it was again, resting quietly against my chest, and my body, traitorous and human, responded to it like a starving man to food he hadn't dared hope for. I wanted to feel nothing. Instead, I felt everything. Daniel shifted slightly. His hand tightened for just a second, a subtle clutch of fingers. He made a small sound. Not quite a sigh, not quite a word, and nestled in deeper. I looked down at him, my breath shallow. His hair was tousled, his jaw tense even in sleep. There was something childlike about his posture, something vulnerable that made me ache. And then, in the quietest whisper, he said it. Let me be her. Just tonight. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even a request. It was a plea, half asleep, half buried in dream, but spoken with something that sounded like pain and longing rolled into one. I felt my throat close. He must have known. Must have felt how I clutched my pillow tighter these days, how I stared too long at her photos. He must have heard me mutter her name in sleep. Maybe in some strange, desperate way he thought this would help. Maybe he needed it just as badly as I did. But it wasn't Laura. It was Daniel. Daniel, who had held me through the funeral. Who had made me tea like she used to. Who had filled the house with music again when I thought I couldn't stand silence. Daniel, who was now wrapped against me like a memory I didn't know I was craving. I should have said something. I should have pulled away, reasserted the boundaries I hadn't even realized were bending. I should have told him that this wasn't okay, that this was grief speaking, not reason. But I didn't. I just closed my eyes and let the rhythm of his breathing lull me back into something that felt like sleep, but wasn't. Something softer. Something suspended. I wasn't sure if it was love or loss or loneliness. But in that moment, it didn't matter. Because for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was sinking. And for the first time, I didn't dream about Laura. The morning light came too early, bleeding into the bedroom with a kind of quiet judgment. I opened my eyes to an empty bed. The pillow beside me was still dented, still warm. Daniel was gone. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. His head on my chest, his breath syncing with mine, that impossible whisper. Let me be her. Just tonight. But no. The ache in my chest wasn't imagination. It was real. And it was complicated. I sat up slowly, rubbing my face. My shirt still smelled faintly like his shampoo, lavender and something woodsy. It clung, to me, like the questions I didn't want to ask. Was it betrayal? To Laura? To myself? To a friendship that had always been built on quiet loyalty and unspoken lines? Or was it grief? Grief finding strange shapes, new forms. My soul reaching out, for warmth wherever it could find it. Or was it something else? I didn't know. I wasn't ready to name it, but it followed me down the hallway and into the kitchen, where I found Daniel standing by the coffee pot like any other morning. Morning, he said, not looking up. Morning, I replied. He poured a mug for each of us, passed one to me. No pause, no hesitation, like the night hadn't happened, like he hadn't rested his head on my chest and whispered something that broke open a door I didn't know existed. We drank in silence. The tension was thick, not angry, not awkward, just full. like a box overstuffed with things we didn't want to unpack. I watched him move around the kitchen with casual efficiency. He made eggs, toast. He even whistled under his breath, some neutral tune I didn't recognize, as if careful not to hum Laura's melody again. But he didn't mention the night before, and neither did I. All day, we kept to our separate corners. He cleaned out the garage. I buried myself in bills and repair lists that didn't matter. Every time we crossed paths, there was a beat of silence too long, a glance too brief. And the worst part? I missed the closeness, the warmth, the weight of him breathing beside me. I hated that part of myself, but I didn't deny it. That night, I lingered in the bathroom longer than usual, staring at my own reflection, wondering what Laura would think of the man looking back. Would she understand? Would she be horrified, or would she see what I had become, a man unraveling under the weight of his own solitude? I turned out the lights and climbed into bed, expecting to lie awake again, consumed by memory and guilt. But before long, I heard it, the soft creak of the hallway floor. The door opened gently. Daniel stood there in the dim light, his hand resting on the frame. "Do you want me to go?" he asked. His voice was calm, careful. He wasn't pushing. He was offering. And in that moment, something inside me gave way. Not with logic, not with answers, just with need. I looked at him for a long second. My throat tightened. I couldn't find words big enough to explain what I felt, the swirl of longing, confusion, and fear. But I managed to. No. Just stay. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He simply crossed the room and laid down on top of the covers, like the night before. He kept a respectful distance, but the space between us still buzzed with something unspoken. We didn't touch, we didn't talk, but our breathing found each other again. And somehow, that was enough. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't always arrive how you expect. Loud, messy, wailing into your hands. Sometimes it comes quietly, dressed as routine. It crawls into the corners of your bed, settles into the way you pour your coffee, waits for you at the bottom of laundry baskets. It mimics the voices you miss, the warmth you ache for. It blurs everything: memory, reality, love, guilt, and eventually, you stop being able to tell where one ends and the other begins. That's where I was when Daniel stopped pretending. It had been nearly 2 months since Laura passed. 2 weeks since Daniel first lay beside me. A few nights since we stopped pretending it was about nightmares or empty houses. He hadn't said anything more. No more whispers. No more, "Let me be her." Instead, he'd started bringing his full self. Quietly. Gently. Authentically. He stopped mimicking Laura's routines. Stopped humming her songs. He made coffee the way he liked it. He read aloud from his favorite old paperbacks while I folded laundry. He asked questions I wasn't ready to answer, then waited patiently in the silence that followed. He was still Daniel, but somehow more himself than I'd ever seen him. And I was still lost, but not alone. That night, I found him already in my room, sitting on the floor against the wall, barefoot, a glass of water in hand. He looked up when I entered, but didn't move. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked softly. He shook his head. "Didn't try." I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the carpet for a moment, then said, "We should talk." He gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah, we probably should have a while ago." The silence stretched, but it wasn't tense. It was honest. Waiting. He spoke first. "I know this has all been confusing, maybe even wrong in some ways, but I want you to know something, and I need you to hear it as the truth. Not guilt, not pressure, just truth." I nodded slowly, keeping my eyes on the floor. He set the glass down and pulled his knees to his chest. "I loved her too," he said. "Not like you did, not romantically, but as a friend, as a part of my life. Losing her, it broke something. In me too." I looked up then. His eyes were red but dry, but I've always loved you, Mike. Quietly. Respectfully. even when it wasn't allowed to be anything more. He held my gaze, his voice calm but trembling at the edges. I never wanted to cross a line. Never wanted to confuse grief with something. It's not, but I couldn't keep watching you break piece by piece. Not when I still had something left to give. I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding again. Not in fear this time, but in the weight of being seen. I ran a hand through my hair and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Why didn't you ever tell me before? Because you loved her, he said. And she was everything to you. I never wanted to take that away. I just wanted to be nearby in whatever way I could. His words sank in like soft rain. I nodded, staring at my hands. I still don't know what I feel. That's okay, he said. I'm not asking for anything. Not an answer, not a title. I just needed you to know that what's been happening between us, it isn't pretend. Not for me. I looked up at him again. Something in my chest loosened, not fixed, but no longer frozen. I stood and walked over to him. He didn't move, just looked up, waiting. I sat down beside him, leaned my back against the same wall. I still talk to her sometimes, I admitted quietly. In my head. I tell her about the garden, the silence, the way you hum. He smiled gently. And what do you think she'd say about all this? He asked. I shrugged. Some days I think she'd be confused. Other days, I think she'd be relieved that I wasn't drinking myself into a corner. Daniel gave a soft laugh. She was always better at understanding people than the rest of us. We sat there for a while, not touching, not speaking, just breathing in the same room, under the same ceiling that used to echo with a very different kind of life. Eventually, I reached out my hand. Not for an answer, not for resolution. Just, for him, he took it without a word. His fingers slid between mine like it had always been meant to happen. And we stayed that way, hand in hand, until our breathing slowed and the room grew dark. Not as husband and wife. Not as stand-ins for someone we'd lost. Just as two people. Both grieving. Both still learning what it means to stay, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't dread falling asleep.